And now I'd like to open the meeting to the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Jim from Arizona, go ahead.
Good evening. The healing Christ is ever with us, and because of this, I am most grateful. There are so many ways that the Christ appears to us, and one is through our roundtable sessions each Sunday morning. This week, the roundtable discussion related to the story of Judas, which I often thought of as a remote Bible story and not as an angel message to me directly associated with me in my activities today. We can so easily fall prey to the Judas kiss in our everyday life. This can be summed up by our session this week, our lesson this week, by the phrase in the responsive reading, I quote, "Cleanse thou me from secret faults." I am most grateful for the lessons I am learning from our roundtable discussions each week. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy.
Recently, I was able to go on vacation, which was a wonderful time made possible by the generosity and love of friends and God's constant care and protection. I'm very grateful for that entire week and for the understanding I've gained here to see it was all a part of God's supply. Thank you. This testimony, however, is not about how much fun I had. I'd like to say how incredibly grateful I am that God has provided me with a home and a purpose here in New Jersey. My whole life I moved around a lot and never felt at home. I used to say that wherever I took off my shoes, I was home. And for decades, that was as good as I could feel. Even up to 4 years ago, before coming to the church, when I would take a vacation, I would get back to where I lived and I would feel this deep sense of loss. Never really knew what to call that feeling. I actually thought it was ingratitude at the time. But I see now it was God cluing me in that there was a home waiting for me, and the ability to be made useful was on the horizon. So when I drove back into New Jersey this past Saturday, I got this amazing feeling. I couldn't wait to get back and get to work. I'm grateful to God that He has given me a home, a place to truly feel happy to be, a place where I can learn and do good and feel supported. This also fills me with joy to know that since God can make me feel at home and useful, He can and will do that to every one of His children who currently feel without place or purpose. Christian Science and this church came to me just when I needed it. I am so grateful for every change that being a member here has brought. Every single lesson, service, discussion, forum post, article, and practitioner phone call is a blessing. Thank you.
Thank you. Chardell from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Hi. Tonight I would like to thank my practitioner who has been praying with me to be single-minded, stayed on God, rather than allowing human thoughts to interfere with my mental poise. Because of this work, when I got an Amber Alert on my phone, I was able to reach and maintain peace. Two things stayed with me. The first was from God's Law of Adjustment by Adam H. Dickey, and this is a paraphrase. When you understandingly declare and bring into thought the law of God, that is all you need to do. God does the rest, because His law is unerring and complete in all situations. Second thing I worked with was from the August 23rd watch. Quote, God, who is only good, is the only power. Therefore, any resistance to it is futile. Unquote. By late afternoon, I received word that the 3-year-old child had been found and was completely safe. I thank you to God, Mary Baker Eddy, the Plainfield Independent Church, and our devoted practitioners. Thank you also for this beautiful service. The music was so uplifting. I listened in the beginning, and I pray. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary.
I'm very grateful for a practitioner in this church who taught me a long time ago that the purpose of any vacation or any journey or any trip was to spiritually refresh yourself so that you could do even better work for God as a result of that. And as a result of that training and teaching, every vacation that we ever took in the last few years was a working trip, and you never take a vacation from God. The previous testifier talked about what a wonderful vacation he had. Well, I had the privilege of being with him on that so-called vacation. And it was not a vacation from God at all, because everybody was working very hard and came back, as he said, spiritually refreshed and ready to keep working. So I'm very grateful for this training, for this teaching, that you never take a vacation from God, that the purpose of anything is to grow spiritually and be better able to do what God has for us to do. It is such a joy to have God's work to do every single day of our lives, and to look forward to doing that work, because nothing else brings joy than that. It's grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Luba. Where's Luba from?
Luba's from Ohio, and
Hi.
this afternoon I got caught in a torrential downpour. I waited it out in a store and attempted to drive after almost an hour when the rain had lessened. But once on the road again, it began to rain even harder, and I drove very slowly to a parking lot as the roads appeared flooded. I remained there until the sky cleared. I know that God alone guided me in all of this. I am so very, very grateful to my practitioner and Plainfield for all I have been learning to use these experiences to prove my reliance on God only. No matter where I am, God is there. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Fairley from Maryland. Go ahead.
Thank you. I am continually grateful for all the help and teaching I have at Plainfield to learn how to practice Christian Science correctly. From my ever-available practitioner, the Bible studies and roundtables, the input from my fellow members, and the weekly lesson sermons. Last week, I experienced an unpleasant pain in my left arm after doing a rather usual task, and was at first somewhat dismayed. I quit using it as much as I usually was doing for a while. But then I claimed, as Mrs. Eddy tells us in Science and Health, that mind, with a capital M, is the source of all movement, and there is no inertia to retard or check its perpetual and harmonious action. The next day, my arm was somewhat better, but I persisted in this truth in order to counter the kind of thoughts that were coming about how I was never going to be able to use it as much again since I am right-handed. But I persisted in knowing the truth, and after a couple more days, the pain completely vanished, and I realized that my arm was as strong as ever. I am very grateful always to God, to Jesus Christ for his demonstration of the truth, and to Mrs. Eddy for giving us this wonderful science. And thank you very much for the beautiful readings on loving God.
Thank you. Linda from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Good evening. I too want to thank you for those beautiful readings on loving God tonight. I am very grateful for our many recent audio recordings of the Science and Health, miscellaneous writings, and other various publications. One night I woke up with an upset stomach. For a short bit I sat up and took time to affirm the truth about God and man that I have been learning here. I focused my thought on what God's goodness and power and presence and tender care. I then turned to our website, healing audios of these books and articles I mentioned earlier. These helped quiet my thought and put my trust in God. I knew this was an upsetness from being in the middle of a tense communication, but with the audios, I was able to sleep through the night, and by the morning there was improvement. But I still called my practitioner because I knew I needed prayer and instruction to address the pattern of behavior that had caused this upsetness in the first place. I was reminded by her that I had been tending the regulator, that is, trying to fix others' problems and trying to manage others' feelings. I found myself involved with an unhealthy form of communication that some call relational triangles. I see it was a form of control and using human will rather than putting God in the center of these relationships. The practitioner reminded me how I should be turning others over to God. I had no further stomach issues and was able to eat the whole day. Our Bible lesson this week is wonderful, and it's stressing on the importance of walking in the light, confessing our sins, and allowing God to cleanse us. I am grateful that this sin in my life, God, was laid out to be faced so I could get rid of it and learn how to live as God intends me to in my actions and my thinking. During this time, since I've been attending Plainfield, I have been healed and blessed from many problems and reformed many bad habits. So I know this will only continue to bless me and those around me. And I'm so grateful for all that is offered here and for Mary Baker Eddy revealing this science for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Dale from Virginia, go ahead.
Thank you. I want to say thanks for those wonderful readings and the other testimonies this evening and the beautiful music. I'm so grateful for learning in this church to be so instant in truth that error is always too late. A week ago, very early in the morning, I thought I had stepped on something, but then found that it was not under my foot, but a large, hard lump appeared on the bottom of my foot, and blood under the skin was coming up and spreading across the top of my foot. At first, this was so startling, I felt completely helpless. But then immediately the thought came, this is not real. It is an attack on my Christ. I did not look at the condition again, nor consider what was going on. My husband and I were leaving very early to go pick up our grandchildren to keep them for the week. Turning to the truth, thoughts came flooding in. A practitioner in this church had said recently that she realized she did not need to fear fear. There is no fear in love. I remembered a testimony where someone asked a 4-year-old what they learned in Sunday school, and they said something like, "Me thinking is God talking." All the truths that were flooding into my consciousness was God talking to me right now. I knew I couldn't be kept from a right purpose and that the motive for our activity was to bless all. The concern that I wouldn't be able to put on a shoe was unfounded, and I very comfortably went through a very active and long day. I don't know when the lump went away. The startling appearance absolutely disappeared in a very short time, and no one else ever noticed it. My gratitude is unbounded to a very loving God who is always on the scene to meet every need that we could possibly have. The statement, truth comes when needed, paraphrasing a statement by Mary Baker Eddy, is certainly true. I am very grateful to be a member of this church.
Thank you. This is Bruce. We had a wonderful blessing in our family. This particular event happened about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Well, we were planning to take our grandchildren to a county fair, and so we purchased a family pack, which was a price package for 2 adults and 2 children. But we had me and my wife and the children's father, as well as the 2 children, so there was 5 of us. So we went there prepared to pay for an additional admission so we could all get in. When we arrived, there was someone at the gate who met us and looked at our paperwork and advised us that we needed to buy yet one more admission. We talked about that, and we understood that was the case. But there was another party that was going into the fair just ahead of us, and they happened to have overheard the entire conversation. And they said, and we'd never even met them before, didn't know them or anything. They said, we bought a family pack as well, but we don't have that many people. So we have an admission left over, and we would love to give it to that family behind us, referring to us. What a generous act of kindness this was. And of course, we looked at them and thanked them immensely and commented on how their generosity and how thoughtful they were and kind, considerate, and thanked them and thanked them and thanked them. You should have seen their eyes light up. It was a mother and daughter, and both of them were just beaming with smiles from ear to ear. Well, I just went away from that experience thanking God, of course, too, because, you listen to the news, the media, and everything that's about you, and it seems like there's just a lot of disturbance and agitation and hate going on. And I think about this incident, it's like God telling us, you know something? There's a lot of good going on in this world, and here's just an example of my goodness for all mankind. That put another smile on my face, that God gave us one little sign to just show us that no matter what the appearances are, good is still going on. Not only is it going on, but it dominates and it is supreme. Good rules. Error does not. And this one little example at the county fair was a powerful example for me. It blessed me immensely, put a smile on my face, and gave me more reassurance that good does indeed dominate everywhere. Thank you, God. Betty from California, go ahead.
Good evening. Tonight, I'm very grateful for this church and its activities, especially the round tables on Sunday and the Bible studies on Saturday. They are most valuable teaching and so very helpful. In particular, I found them very helpful when reading the weekly lesson sermon each day. Sometimes a specific citation from the Bible or Science and Health was discussed, and when it comes up again in a new lesson, the remembered discussion comes back to open up the new lesson. So glad the Bible studies will be resuming again on September 10th. Very much looking forward to it. And thank you for the wonderful readings and for the beautiful music.
Thank you. Craig.
Those are really beautiful readings. And so much inspiration is given in this church. I thank God for our activities and our always available practitioners. I was doing good work, supporting and helping a few family members this weekend, it was taking a lot out of me. There was a lot of love needed, and there was a lot of prayer and handling, knowing the truth. Well, when I came back to church on Sunday, luckily I had the chorus to sing. And that activity, to be in that singing such a uplifting and true, everything in it is true, song, just lifted my spirits. I felt more like my own self. It just made a great difference. Well, I went on that day and the last couple of days, but today I needed some additional support because I just needed to know that God was working through me and that everything was going to be right. When I called a practitioner, because I was in a position where my boss was away and things still need to be done right. Because if they weren't, there are sometimes things to pay. So I was told, work with the definition of God. God is all-knowing in science and health, and it helps so much. God is all-knowing, all-seeing, all-acting, all-wise, all-loving, and eternal. In principle, I really stopped there. But I'm that. If I'm his reflection, then I can expect that I can know whatever I need to know, and I can see whatever I need to see and do whatever I need to do. Well, I worked with it, and I went forward, and I felt confident and made progress in the work I was doing for job, and had a remedy to help our customer. And my son, he must have caught on, and he made progress on his summer project for school. And my wife and I were saluting him at dinner about how great he did. He was so eager to finish it. I thank God for this wonderful support and all these activities that just bless. Thank God for Mary Baker Eddy.
Thank you. Sharon.
Several weeks ago, there was a statement in the lesson that reminded me of a healing I had. It was, prepare thine heart and stretch out thine hands toward him. And many years ago, I had a large debt that I could not see my way out of. This statement made me see that I had to open my heart to God, trust him, reach out to him, and not outline how this debt was going to be paid. As I was working with this statement came to me, God has always taken care of me, and he always will, and the fear left. Every month, without fail, I was able to make this payment. Putting my expenses on a piece of paper, I did not have enough money to the human sense, but reaching out to God, opening my heart to him, and stretching out my hand to him, the payment was made every month until the debt was free. God has a solution to every problem. If we have the problem, the answer is already there. I'm so grateful for Christian Science, for being a member of this independent church, and for practitioner help. And I'm so grateful to be part of this wonderful mission. And thank you for the readings.
Thank you. Carol.
I needed to have a physical examination recently for insurance purposes. And when I told the doctor that I hadn't had an examination since my youngest child was born, and he's now married and has 2 children of his own, They worked really hard to try to find something wrong with me, and they couldn't find anything. The only thing they found was that my blood platelets were a little low. And so a week later, I had to go back for another test, and he said, now we can't find why, so we have to check one more thing. We have to take something out of your bone or whatever. So anyway, I said to him, well, before you do that, why don't we do another blood test? And he said, okay, we'll do that. And we did. And he said, and as soon as they do it, come back up here because we'll have the results. So I went up, and all he said was, you don't have to come back. Your platelets are fine. So apparently they went up about almost 50%. So I just am so very grateful for God's care. While this was going on, I was remembering a practitioner saying that the king's daughter is all beautiful within. And also, the practitioner has said many times that if you ever have to go into a medical experience, God and you are in charge, not the doctor. So I wasn't at all afraid to speak up and ask for this alternative thing. And I am just so very grateful for God, serving God with all our hearts. He takes care of us. And I am so grateful for the practitioner's help. The practitioner's been supporting all through this, and everything has worked out perfectly. I am so very grateful, and just it's proof that God heals and God keeps us perfect as we should be. Very grateful for this meeting tonight, and so grateful for the readings. Thank you.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the beautiful readings and all the testimonies so far given. I am so grateful that studying Christian Science has brought me or has taught me how to love God as the only presence and power. This means to obey His laws, look to Him for all my needs and all my answers to any decision I have to make, and to love my neighbor as myself. The readings mentioned, we love man more because we love God most. This had to mean something. Before Christian Science, I did not connect that to love God also means to stop every wrong thought about myself and others, and to not take in as real all the discordant reports we hear every day, including all the sickness and illnesses that are reported that we are to be afraid of. It means that if I hold any of these as real, I'm saying God's creation is not perfect. And I'm making my father, mother, God, a loving father, mother, less than what He is. Doing my best to check my thinking consistently, to hold the truth about God and man has brought me so much peace. I am so grateful for everything I have learned so far in Christian Science and all that I still have to learn in the years ahead. Thank you so much for this beautiful meeting tonight.
Thank you. Benjamin.
Thank you. I'm also grateful for the reading tonight. It's a wonderful reading. I'm also very happy to be here tonight. I feel so lucky, really. And I just want to say, to express my gratitude to what I've learned here. We hear a lot when people throw around the word Christian, or somebody being a Christian, or somebody being a Christian Scientist. It's a word that's being thrown around a lot. Quite frankly, to me, I don't really know what it means to me in terms of my spiritual reality, who I really am. It's a term that I'm beginning to wrap my head around, or maybe try to understand what it means, because it's very new to me. But when I think about it, somebody being a Christian or a Christian Scientist, the way it's being used today, I'm not satisfied, because it's being used in a way that somebody feel like you are better than the other person who doesn't have that title attached to him. Because if a Christian Scientist, and when you see somebody who doesn't have it, are you better than that person? So I'm trying to understand that. But I really thank God for who we really are, not a Christian or Christian Scientist or whatever religion anybody may belong to out there. But that one thing that God made all of us to be His children. I am His child. You are His child. It doesn't matter what religion you belong to or what part of the world you live in. You are a child of God. My understanding of that helps me actually to be able to relate to somebody, even somebody that I've never met before, even somebody that I didn't know anything about. Knowing myself as a child of God and knowing that person as a child of God gives me the opportunity that I actually strive for, to be able to reach out to that person, to relate to that person. And if that person needs my help, I will be able to help that person, knowing very well that I'm not better than that person. I'm not greater than that person. I'm not in any position or any form better than that person, but we are all equal in the sight of God as His children. And if you see yourself or being able to see somebody that way, that's the only way you can help that person. That's the only way you can pray for that person. That's the only way you can love that person. But when you think you are better than that person, maybe you're a Christian, that person is not, nothing really is going to happen. I'm so grateful for this learning, because it wouldn't be possible if I'm not in this church being able to know what it means to be a child of God, because it's something that's being taught here. And I'm very grateful that I'm able to grasp it. Thank you.
Thank you. Lil.
I'm so grateful for the honesty and the strong Christly love in this church. It's not fluffy, but strong and speaks up when needed, because that's what helps and heals. That's what Mrs. Eddy taught and practiced, for which I'm very grateful. Christian Science lived saves lives. It saved mine. And I thank God from the bottom of my heart. And I'm grateful for the readings tonight.
Thank you. Mary.
I'll read from our bulletin board on our church website, the First Pennsylvania. Thanks to one and all for the beautiful service tonight. That was a couple of weeks ago. Readings, music, testimonies. My hope is renewed. And then also, perhaps another will find this quote from a letter by Mrs. Eddy helpful, as I have. Quote, "What you have to meet, dear one, is only a fear, and what pacifies fear does not destroy it. Take your weapon that kills it. The first commandment, and with that, cut off its head, no matter if you have some fighting to do, for done it must be." And that's from the Blue Book, page 209. It's always been a favorite of mine. And then Virginia, thank you so much for Wednesday meeting readings on progress and promotion with God's protection. The faithfulness of the 3 Hebrew men are such an inspiration, and the words from Mrs. Eddy's article on obedience are so valuable, pointing out the way. I love the words and promise, quote, "We shall have no faith in evil when faith finds a resting place and scientific understanding guides man," end quote. Many thanks to all who shared the results of their dedicated work in turning to God and finding blessings for others as well as for themselves. And then Georgia, thanks for the great watching point 280 this week. something we must all refer to when the going appears tough. And 2 from Pennsylvania. Thank you for the sign message displayed in front of our church. A loving heart knows no fear. How profound and perfect. And then thank you all for singing this song today during our church service. If ever we needed the Lord before, we sure do need him now. It was a toe tapper that lifted my soul right up to God in praise. And then a couple from Costa Rica. I enjoyed the service, especially the solo, which was fun. I love the way the Plainfield Church deals with this, spontaneous and joyful, putting importance on the message and how it is brought, and not on musical perfection. I have known some churches who hired a professional soprano, who is not a scientist or not even perhaps a Christian, to do solo, only for money. The scientific statement of being and 1 John 3 were also read in an outstanding manner. And that was our Dear Faith reading. And then also from Costa Rica, I just listened to the reading of the New Birth, and it was really a treat I plan to repeat. Bit of a poet in me. So, I know the time is going over, but I wanted to express my gratitude too for the readings tonight. The thought, love the Lord thy God. When I first came to this church, I found it hard to love God because due to old theology, I think I was afraid of God. And so it took some work for me to realize this Christian Science God of total 100% love, not punishment, nothing ever to fear, only love. It was read tonight all the wonderful things that God is to us, our rock, our strength, our fortress, our deliverer, our high tower, and that he hears our voice of supplication. And also the statement from Signs and Health meant a great deal to me in getting to the point where I could actually feel love for God. And that is from Signs and Health, where Mrs. Eddy says, simply asking that we may love God will never make us love him, but the longing to be better and holier, expressed in daily watchfulness and in striving to assimilate more of the divine character, will mold and fashion us anew until we awake in his likeness. I turn to that often and would work to be longing to know him better, longing to be holier, expressed in that daily watchfulness. Was I being watchful, watching my thinking? Was it stayed on God? Was I doing my world watching? And then was I striving to become more and more like God? And to think about what that meant. And as Craig said tonight, the definition of God, that applies to me, to each one of us. And we can strive to be more like God until, as Mrs. Eddy says, we do. We're molded and fashioned anew in his likeness. I'm so grateful for these wonderful lessons about God that we learn in this church. Grateful for dear Mrs. Eddy giving us Science and Health and these wonderful Wednesday services. And I thank you all.
Thank you.